Mitchell Sample.
All of us.
Oh yeah. Where's she at in the hospital? Tell her, I meant to tell her, she asked me this morning just to show you how busy I am. I told her, I meant to tell her I'm going tomorrow. I didn't know which one she was in. Marie Jackson. Anyone else? Antioch. Our day outside too.
Antioch Youth.
Antioch Youth. Well, you got a bunch of new ones you need to be talking to.
Bless them.
You got a bunch of them. You probably, I wouldn't say Robert Knight, I don't want you to do that. Don't do that. Antioch Youth, who else? I think that concludes our prayer list. Let's bow for prayer, shall we? God, we thank you for our list. Thank you for our night and the day's journey. We ask you to touch according to your mercy. Heavenly Father, Marie Jackson, Mitchell Sample family, of course, Antioch Youth, Lena Hart, Brady Morris, and so many others. Now, God, open our mind and understanding. In Jesus' name, amen. Listen, if you guys have any donations toward the Alzheimer's walk, please see one of our walkers. We've got 2 walkers here. Please.
Yeah, 4.
Oh.
5.
5. Well, Melanie preaching. She ain't gonna be walking.
Right. I was gonna say, why she not walking?
She gonna preach and walk? You're gifted, ain't you? After I get done preaching, all I want to do is go home and go to sleep, eat and sleep somewhere. Eat and sleep somewhere. Well, you're better than me. But give one of these, if you have a donation for the Antioch team, we got our own walking team. Amen. And we want to see you all walk. Please give donations to any one of our walkers so that we can, I'm giving some money to. Let's turn to Genesis 43. I thought y'all walking, you ain't walking Sunday, you're walking third Sunday. Is that the 18th?
Yes.
Oh, 43. All right, let's review. Everybody should have a packet. If not, you need to see Mr. Crisp. Get your packet.
Get us a packet. What is it?
Night class.
What is that? It's okay, I don't know.
Yeah.
Let's review what happened in the 42nd chapter.
The brothers went to Egypt to get something to eat. He recognized his brothers, but they didn't recognize him.
They still don't.
He wanted the younger brother to come back so he could make sure that he was okay. And the money back that they gave to take for the food plus the more.
Gave them more. What did they think?
They were settling.
Was there a stipulation when they came back to Egypt, if they would come back to Egypt?
Bring the brother back, right? The young brother?
Yep.
Benjamin. They thought they had been set up. Stipulation is that to bring Benjamin back. What does the old man say, Jacob?
He said, no.
So they don't go back. So Simeon. So what's going on? Simeon's stuck there in captivity. They're probably okay. They'll see Simeon when they see him. So Simeon is in jail there, and nobody really cares. Yeah. That's what the problem with the family. Now he kind of whined about it, but it wasn't really what he was focused on the baby. The baby's fine. Let's look at the 43rd chapter, beginning at the first verse. I'll read these first verses for you. We'll stop and exegete the passage. Now the famine was severe in the land, so it came about when they had finished eating the grain which they had brought to Egypt, that their father said to them, "Go back, buy us a little food." Now, That means that some time had gone by between when they had come back. Jacob said no, so they thought maybe we can wait out the famine. Because Jacob has money. I don't know if you understand that Jacob's very wealthy, but being wealthy in a place where there's no food really doesn't profit you. So he's got money, just at a bad time. So he says, hey, we're broke. I mean, without food, we're hungry again, so you guys go back to Egypt. Get us some more food. Judah, the oldest brother, spoke to him, saying, the man solemnly warned us, you shall not see my face unless your brother's with you. If you send our brother with us, we will go down and buy you food. But if you do not send him, we will not go down. For the man said to us, you will not see my face unless your brother is with you. Okay? They didn't go down to Egypt again. The food runs out. Now they have to go. Verse 6. Then Israel said, Israel was Jacob. Notice how they're used synonymous now. Wasn't used like that prior to this word. But now, Israel is Jacob. I wonder why the author thought it necessary to start employing his name, his God-given name, as opposed to his birth name. I think it's because
He had 12 sons.
well, he already had the 12 sons and they weren't doing that.
But they were going to become a nation.
Yeah, and they're getting closer to them becoming a nation.
Yes.
And so, in a literary form, the author is trying to remind us of that. So he starts using Jacob's name interchangeably. Israel, Jacob, Israel, Jacob, Israel, Jacob. Same there. Comments? Okay, let's keep reading. Blame. Let's talk about blame. Verse 6. Then Israel said, why do you treat me so badly by telling the man whether you still had another brother? Why'd you do that? But they said, the man questioned particularly about us and our relatives, saying, is your father still alive? Have you another brother? So we answered his questions. Could we possibly know that he would say, bring your brother down? Judah said to his father Israel, send the lad, send the boy with me, and we'll arise and go, that we may live and not die, we as well as you and our little ones. I myself will be surety for him. You may hold me responsible for him if I do not bring him back to you and set him before you then. Let me bear the blame before you forever. For if we had not delayed, surely by now we could have returned twice. Why did they delay in going back?
Because Israel, Jacob, wasn't going to send his Benjamin. And they had to give him time to kind of, let it sink in a little bit. And it had to be a need because they knew they couldn't go back without him. So unless there was a dire need, it didn't make any difference to them.
Yes, there was a dire need. It didn't make any difference to him. We could have been there, been back, got Simeon, maybe gone on with life. At least we wouldn't have left Simeon in limbo like this. And it wouldn't have been as bad. But Jacob does something. He blames. He says, why did you tell him in the first place that you had a brother? Do you know that you should never follow people who blame? If you find a leader who blames, you need to get away from him. If you're in a relationship and the other person blames, you really need to think about that relationship. People who blame are very counterproductive. Don't work with them if you can avoid it. Blamers never solve problems. All the blamer wants to do is point to what you did and try and alleviate themselves any responsibility. Stay away from blamers. They're not good leaders, not good to have. Blamers never take responsibility for anything and have a way of manipulating and making everything the other person's fault. Do you know any blamers? Israel was a blamer. Jacob, same guy, but yes.
And then it gave him an opportunity to try to figure out, how come he asked about Jacob? He wanted, why did y'all tell him that about Benjamin? And then they could give him the explanation, which made him think, because the Lord was with Jacob, what is it, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and he could begin to see there's more going on than just, he's there and this one is here.
Yeah. Yeah. Any other comments?
Well, we can't fault Jacob for loving his son, because he had already walked the one of his son by Jacob.
But you can fault him for blaming. That doesn't help any situation. For him loving Benjamin, actually, if you want to play the blame game, it's all Jacob's fault. Because Joseph would never have been sold into Egypt had he not favored him in such a manner. And this whole scenario would have never happened had he not done that.
Yeah.
But, see, when you play the blame game, you have to omit facts. Stay away from people who blame. Best thing I can tell you, get away from them. Because nothing is ever the blamer's fault. They're good at making everything everyone else's fault. They're manipulative. Blame, 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 blame.
Well, that sounds like a good commentator. Even in a basketball or football game, what they should do, but they didn't do.
Yeah, but Monday morning quarterbacking doesn't help the team. Do you know, we do that in the church too. We Monday morning quarterbacking, tell me what the pastor should have done. Have no idea what it means to be a pastor, but you know everything I should have done. That makes me angry. Now, you want to see me get red and all turn the colors, start Monday morning quarterbacking. But what you should have done was such and such and such and such, and the situation's over. A person like that should never be in a leadership in anything. See, if you listen to because what the blamer says is if you had done it my way, we wouldn't be in this mess. That's really what Jacob is saying. But how dare he when it's his fault? Verse 11, then their father Israel said to them, if it must be so, then do this. Take some of the best products of the land in your bags and carry down to the man as a present a little balm, a little honey, aromatic gum and myrrh, pistachio nuts and almonds. Take double the money in your hand, and take back in your hand the money that was returned in the mouth of your sack. See, Jacob has money. He just doesn't have any food where he is. Perhaps it was a mistake. Take your brother also, rise and return to the man. And may God Almighty grant you compassion in the sight of the man, so that he will release to you your brother, Simeon and Benjamin. And as for me, if I am saddened of my children, I'm saddened of my children. It has to be this way, it has to be. He's kind of giving up. So whatever has to happen, has to happen. So his thinking is, well, I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll reward him. We'll give him something more than that which he is expecting of you, so that it looks like a peace offering is being made. Jacob is used to this type of thing. He's used to this type of bargaining, this type of trouble. He's not shocked by it. So what I'll do is I'll give you more things, so that when you go to vice Pharaoh, you will be able to at least show that you're coming in good faith and good conscience with a good attitude. So I'm giving you the gifts. Money, all kinds of perfumes, goodies, snacks. I'm bringing these so that you'll say to him that we're making a peace treaty, so that you come to him in peace. And it is obvious that it is in peace, and not with you're not spies, you're not there to create a problem, you're there to make peace. Right? So at least it looks like that. So I'll send you with the peace offering, and that may help. Alright? Verse 15. So the men took this present, and they took double the money in the hand, and Benjamin Then they arose and went down to Egypt and stood before Joseph. When Joseph saw Benjamin with them, he said to his house steward, "Bring the men into the house, kill an animal, make ready, for the men are to dine with me at noon." So the man did as Joseph said and brought the men to Joseph's house. Now the men were afraid because they were brought to Joseph's house. This is kind of justice. They have all of this fear, all of these concerns. They're worried, naturally so, because he brought them into his own home. And they're thinking either he's going to make us a slave, or he's going to kill us, he's going to do something to us. We're invited to dinner, but this could be it for us. So they're worried. And what brought about this time, what always brings fear, worry, paranoia, is sin. They sold him into slavery years ago. They don't know it's Joseph, but it is there. They know that their actions toward Joseph has brought this upon them, but they think it's God getting them back in some way, and they don't know what's going to befall. So they're ready to face the music, but they're really, really paranoid. Yep. Sin does that. It takes away all your peace. It troubles your mind. You see it all here with the Hebrew boys. It causes you to, it can cause a person to really act crazy, sin. He was young, and now he's decked out in Egyptian clothing. And he speaks Egyptian, and he's pretending. He's probably got a different hairstyle. He's pretending not to even know Hebrew, their language. And so it's a great story because he knows everything that's going on, and they know nothing. Not a word. And there's some clues as we keep reading, too, in this chapter, too, that we need to look at. Here's what they say. Verse 18, now the men were afraid because they were brought to Joseph's house, and they said, "It is because of the money that was returned in our sacks." Paranoia. The first time that we are being brought in, that he may seek occasion against us and fall upon us. Fall upon us is just a fancy word play for get us. He might get us and make us slaves and sell our donkeys. And take us for slaves with our donkeys. With donkeys. Why are donkeys important?
They were gold bearers.
Donkeys during this time,
That's how you transport.
they can move stuff, they're no cars. So you want to have a rented transportation business in the ancient world, you get you a bunch of donkeys. And out of that, you can rent donkeys. Right? People can get your donkeys, or you sell the donkey for a great amount of money because the donkey can transport things, as Mr. Chris pointed out, and you and your family. And so they're afraid he's going to take the stuff that he takes our donkeys, we can't get home. It's our transportation. Okay? So they came near to Joseph's house steward, spoke to the steward at the entrance of the house. They're really desperate now. They're talking to the steward of the house. And said, "Oh, my Lord," little L, which just means sir. "Oh, my sir, we indeed came down the first time to buy food. And it came about when we came to the lodging place that we opened our sacks, and behold, each man's money was in the mouth of his sack, our money in full. So we have brought it back in our hand. We have also brought down other money in our hand to buy food. We do not know who put our money in our sacks." He, the steward, said, "Be at ease, do not be afraid." Now watch this. "Your God, little big G, and the God of your father has given you treasure in your sacks." The steward knows about the one true God too. Why do you think the steward knows about the one true God? Because of Joseph. Even though Joseph had gone through, he had never relinquished or turned his back on his faith. And those who worked under him probably were evangelized every day and came into an understanding of who Hebrew Elohim, we talked about that name last week, is the name of God mentioned in Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, Elohim created the heavens and earth. And the boys don't pick up on it. The other brothers don't pick up on the fact that this, he didn't call God Ra, the Egyptian name for God. He calls God Elohim. He calls him the same name as the Hebrew boys. Now, isn't that interesting? But they don't pick up on it. He just said something. Now, the only people that call God Elohim are Abraham, Isaac, Jacob's descendants. What in the world is this Egyptian steward, which just means a manager of the house, referring to God as Elohim for? That should have been a clue, but they missed it. He keeps saying, your God is the one who gave you the money. Your God is the one who's taking care of everything. Don't be afraid. Your God, the God of your father, has given you treasure in your sacks. What he's saying to him is that Elohim, the very God that you worship, your fathers worship, he's the one who made sure you had the money. He super rules everything. And they don't pick up on that because they're so worried about what's going to befall them or what's going to happen to them. They are not at all open. They're not quick on their feet. And so the fact that he keeps saying God or Elohim, which should have said that either you've come into contact with my brother a few years ago or you've got some Hebrew connection. They don't even ask that because they're so preoccupied with the consequences of their sin. Then he goes on to say in the second part of the verse, I had your money. Then he brought Simeon out to them. Simeon's still alive. All right? Then the man brought the men into Joseph's house, gave them water, washed the feet, and he gave their donkeys fodder. It's donkey food, okay? So they prepared the present for Joseph's coming at noon, for they had heard that they were to eat a meal there. What is the significance of foot washing in the ancient world? The significance of foot washing? Go ahead.
They wore shoes, and there was nothing but sand and dirt they were walking in.
And sand and dirt gets in the toenails, it's all feet, and well, even with ancient world sandals, you still have the problem of sand and dirt. And so when you get to someone's house, it is the good act, it's the good nature of a good host to foot wash. Foot washing is a good host. A good host recognizes that you've come a journey, so what we'll do is we are going to wash your feet. Notice he's rolled out the rug for them. The royal rug for them. He's got the donkeys getting fed. He's got their feet being washed. They're in a pretty good position. Foot washing, in some denominations practice foot washing today as an act of humility. I don't necessarily think foot washing is necessary in 20th century America because we don't have a dirt road everywhere, sandy streets. I don't think that that's an ordinance to be practiced or to be observed in 2022. But some denominations do foot washing right next to communion as a sign of humility. It was in the ancient world, it was very customary, but in the West, I don't think it holds the value that it held then. Just wanted to touch bases and deal with that as we do. So they prepared the present that Jacob had given them before they left. Verse 26, when Joseph came home, they brought into the house to him the present which was in their hand and bowed to the ground before him. That's fulfillment part 2. Fulfillment of what? His original dream. That they would all bow down before him. That is fulfillment. It's happening now. Fulfillment is when a prophecy or a dream happens. Now it's happening. Now they're bowing down. We saw this beforehand. Yes, Reverend Kilpatrick.
Isaac taught us or asked us the difference between a false prophet and a real prophet. The real prophet says, come true. False prophet says, never happened. So, and when Joseph told them that about the sun, moon, and the stars, and the seas, it's actually happening to them. So he's a real prophet.
Yes, it is. Because it actually happened. It's fulfilled in time. So, what is they bow down to him? What is bowing down in the ancient world? What's the significance of it? Respect. It doesn't necessarily have to do with worship. They weren't worshiping Joseph, but they were respecting the fact that he's regal. And what you do to those who are regal, you show them the ultimate respect by bowing. In Asia, in China, at least when I was in Beijing, they are westernized in a sense where they moved to handshake. But if you go out into the country and to the outskirts, bowing is still a form of respect and not worship. Okay? Japan, same thing. Tokyo, in Japan, it's the same thing. China, same thing. And of course, Korea, same thing. In the Asian countries, bowing is a form of respect. And of course, in the Middle East, it is the same for someone who's of regal nature. But they're bowing down just as he said he was. All right? Here's what he asked about their welfare and said, is your old father well, of whom you spoke? Is he still alive? They said, your servant, our father, is well. He's still alive. They bow down in homage. Verse 29, as he lifted his eyes and saw his brother Benjamin, his mother's son, he said, is this your youngest brother, of whom you spoke to me? And he said, may God be gracious to you, my son. Now that should have been another. May God be gracious to you, my son. Joseph hurried out, for he was deeply stirred over his brother, and he sought a place to weep. And he entered his chamber and wept there. Why do you think he's an emotional mess? He's in the other room crying, weeping. It isn't just he's happy to see him. He's happy to see him well. He's happy to see the fact that they didn't, like you said, do to him what they did to Joseph. So he's pleased. He's got a good attitude about it. He's happy. He also is still stirring with the revenge piece for his brother. A couple of things for a Christian. Revenge is forbidden for us. We are never to take revenge. Although revenge is very tempting. The Christian is never to take revenge. We make room for the wrath of God. We do not make room for the wrath of God as we allow God to take vengeance. We do not take vengeance on our enemies. But revenge is so tempting. But the problem with revenge is it's so unsatisfying. Because when you get them back, did you really get them back as good as you wanted to get them back? Did you? Should I get them back again? Should I get them back? It's unsatisfying. It feels like it's what you need, but revenge is sinful. It is not to be taken by the believer, even when wrong. Okay? I'm going to get you for what you did to me. Can't do it. Joseph is struggling with that, too. So his emotions are all over the place. He's in the other room right now weeping and crying, and part of him is angry, part of him is happy, and another part is also happy again that his father is still okay there. Because that brings back memories of childhood. Bouncing on his father's knee, being the favored son. And there's still love for his brothers. He must have spent some time with them. So he is emotionally in all sorts of different places right now.
He might have forgiveness
Huh?
So you're gonna have to have some forgiveness to his brothers, you know, to make yourself right. You're gonna have to forgive them for what they did to him.
Can't tell you yet. I gotta let the story unfold. I gotta let the story unfold. I can't tell you yet. And part of it is probably being convicted in the Old Testament sense of conviction, in the sense that he knows what God's will is. God is a loving God who is forgiving, and he wants, there's part of him that wants to get these guys back, but there's another part that knows that that's his own flesh and blood. And so, he's emotionally messed up. I mean, he's got his brother here, and keep in mind, why does he love Benjamin so much?
That's a full brother, and that's Rachel's child.
That's Rachel's child, yeah.
Rachel's child.
Yeah.
I also like this verse here about him because he had the authority to do whatever he pleased to do, but he chose not to do it because he was under the household of the Lord. He didn't know God.
He's deeply stirred over his brothers, and he saw a place to cry, and he entered his chamber and wept there. Verse 31. Then he washed his face, came out, and he controlled himself and said, serve the meal. So they served him by himself, and them by themselves, and the Egyptians who ate with him by themselves, because the Egyptians could not eat bread with the Hebrews, for that is loathsome to the Egyptians. A couple of reasons for that. I want to touch bases. I want to explain to you, if you were a Hebrew, you could make it in Egypt. Okay, you could come there during this time and you could make it. But there were prejudices about Hebrew people. Number one, they were shepherds. Shepherds are all day with sheep. It's pretty nasty and dirty and lowly work, right? Well, this is how prejudice gets started. It's based upon people's perception. These are lesser people. And so the Egyptians, and even when Israel moves into Egypt, there's a divide. You'll find that there's a place, and I showed it to you already, but there's a place for the Egyptians, and there's a place for the Hebrew people, so that they go, so the two don't intertwine. And you'll find one reason they have a major problem with them is it's an early form of racism. We don't want to be with the Hebrew people because the Hebrew people are lesser, they bring us down, and there's a whole lot of bad stuff about them that's out there. You know, one thing about them is that people thought during that time is that they were rebel rousers. You remember that thing Abraham did with the 300 men he had when he went to rescue Lot? Anybody remember that? Lot gets kidnapped, Abraham takes 318 of his trained men, and they go get Lot. Well, how does that story get told throughout the nations? These people just came in, ransacked us, fought, and took our slave, Lot. Stay away from the Hebrews. No, that's not the whole story. Let me never get the whole story. Nobody ever asked what the whole story is. They only ask what part of the story is.
Well, that's like the Samaritan and the Jews, isn't it?
Jews will have racial issues with the Samaritans.
Yes.
But racism, at least the racism here, they can't eat together. You got 3 tables of people. You got the royalty. Joseph eats by himself because he's royalty. Royalty doesn't eat with regular people. Then you have the Egyptians. The Egyptians will not eat with the Hebrews. So you've got to have 3 tables. 3 tables. 3 tables. And we see, even in the early days of their stay in Egypt, that racism is possible. Yes?
Religion also was one of the big things by the Egyptians serving many gods, polytheism. And the Hebrews only believed in one God.
It's a lot of misconception, yep. The religious piece too.
Yeah.
They probably think you're absolutely nuts because you're praying to a God you can't see. All the Egyptians' gods are visible. Well, you people are absolutely crazy. You have a God you can't see. Does that make, I mean, think about it from an unsaved mindset. Why in the world would you pray to something when you can pray to the sun, the moon, the star, to someone you can't see? That doesn't make sense to them. And you keep talking about some single God as if there's only one God. As Reverend Kilpatrick pointed out, there's a lot of misconceptions about the Hebrew people. Yes.
Going back to Abraham, remember when he and Sarah went there, he said that Sarah was his sister, they were in Egypt, and then their women started having miscarriages and a lot of things because Pharaoh wanted her.
Messing with the Hebrew people.
Yeah, as a part of his harem.
Yep.
And the Lord said, nope. And so every time, and the same thing with Isaac, you were saying,
yeah.
But every time they came in contact with them, they saw their God was more powerful, that God, the Hebrew God, was more powerful than their God in some way. So they wanted to get away from them.
Their real issue has more to do with their misunderstanding and stereotypes about it. I told you the 318 trained men Reverend Kilpatrick mentioned when Isaac wife was taken and then the women couldn't have babies in the house. They have horrible views of Hebrews. Like I said, even when the nation of Israel comes in as guests, they'll still be in a different section of Egypt than other people because of the stigma against them. Racism happens when beliefs have been so twisted against another people group. Racism has to do with power, control, and it affects every walk of life. It affects economics. People keep saying it doesn't, and it does. It affects social standing, self-understanding. It affects every aspect of life. And it has a lot to do with, let me give you the perception, Birth of a Nation. Many of you know what Birth of a Nation is. Birth of a Nation is the movie that they show right after the 13th Amendment. Birth of a Nation was what it pictured was black men freed from slavery that just wanted white women and would do anything to get white women, including rape them. Had you grown up on the wrong side of the South, you might have heard this about the Ku Klux Klan. The Ku Klux Klan, to them, were heroes that were put in place to protect white women from being raped by black men. Depending on who told you, depending on what information you got, they thought the Ku Klux Klan were heroes. They were warriors and defenders of the nation because we've got this change and this Lincoln has signed these amendments that has caused these people to be free. These people free are going to be a problem. And so you have this group called the Ku Klux Klan, founded in Terre Haute, Indiana, mind you, who their responsibility is to quote unquote protect white people. Well, see, that's the truth. But when it comes to racism and prejudice, the truth never factors in what's really happening. What they were really mad about was they no longer could get their cotton picked for free. They now had to pay for their cotton being picked. And Lincoln had really hurt them in the process because they said, we're going to go under, we're going to be awful because we have made a whole industry off the backs of these people. We don't care. But we made a whole industry off the backs of these people, and now we're going to have to pay somebody to do it. And we don't have the money. Can you imagine if you paid the workers what they were worth? We would not have the profit that we would have. All for us. We're going to be poor. So now, not only are we mad with Lincoln, okay, I'm not saying Lincoln was necessarily a great man. I'm simply saying that he signed the right bill, okay? He signs the bill, they're mad with Lincoln, but the people that they can take it out on is people like your great-great-grandparents, because your great-great-grandparents can't read. Your great-great-grandparents can't read, so that they do wander into some farm somewhere that they own. Many of them may have some skills, but they don't realize you have to pay taxes on this stuff. And what European society has always done is attack in the ignorance of people. We're coming to confiscate your land. Bill, we're going to take your land. And he doesn't know. He doesn't understand that he has taxes to be paid to him. Then you talk about the behavior of an ex-slave. Well, he's an ex-slave. He's never been taught. He's never come to a place where he learned how to conduct himself as a gentleman conducts himself. He was a slave all his life. He's like a jailbird that's been freed. He's now got no responsibility, but guess what? He's got no place to go. So you're mad that he's looting the local tavern. He only knows to do that because he's been a slave all of his life. And if he did learn to read, no one taught him to read. And now you created this myth called Birth of a Nation, which helped birth the race problem in this country. Reverend Kilpatrick.
Thinking about this changing a bit back to Esau, Jacob's twin, how he assimilated into that Canaanite Egyptian culture, based on the fact he had Egyptian wives, and the Lord had told Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob not to marry those women, don't get involved. And Esau did, Ishmael did, and you could see even in the New Testament as they talk about them, they say the Lord loved Jacob, but he hated Esau because of what Esau represented. He went and assimilated into that culture where that polytheism was,
Yes, he did. Yes, he did. Yes, he did.
In fact, Jacob had to move away from Esau for fear.
Right. At the end of the life, remember Jacob did some dirt to Esau. Even at the end, he was supposed to come back and meet him, and they were going to be family, and Jacob never goes back. He is a trickster to the very end. Dirty to the end. Now, I'll be honest with you, I do feel sorry for Esau in the way that Jacob treated him and continued to outsmart him over and over. And even at the end of his life, when Esau is forgiving, and Esau has the pagan or the polytheistic roots because he's gone out and he's married Egyptian women. But even at the end, Jacob is just a dog to him. Esau's like, well, what Jacob says is, you go on ahead and we'll meet you there. And Jacob goes completely in the opposite direction and never see him again, and he didn't have to do that. He's a very, very dirty individual. But getting back to, he's awful. And he's still awful as an old man. You can still see the character of Jacob, a forgiven man, a man of God, but you can still see that terrible aspect of this tricking individual. So you have a racial issue in the land of Egypt. Let me tell you something about the table arrangement. Verse 33. Now they were settled before him, the firstborn according to his birthright, and the youngest according to his youth. And the men looked at one another in astonishment. The way Jacob set the table was from oldest to youngest. Well, here's another clue. How did he know that, fellas? They're sitting around shocked like, wow, we're set up as what? Oldest to youngest. Youngest to oldest. And it's set up in exact birth order. Something isn't right here, but guess what? Because of the sin and the paranoia that sin can cause, they're not picking up on any of these clues. The guy's a Hebrew. He knows the Hebrew. He knows something about the Hebrew God. Not only does he know it, his servants know it, which is very common. When you're under someone, you take their faith, you take their religion in the ancient world, and they all know it. They all know about Elohim. How do they all know about Elohim? They're not putting this together. Now we're seated at the table. He's real interested in our Father. He's real interested in the little brother. Okay? They're not putting two and two together. And he's really like, how's the old man? Still alive? How's Benjamin? Here's the biggest clue of all. Men are looking at each other astonished. In verse 34, he took portions to them from his own table. But Benjamin's portion was 5 times as much as any of theirs. So they feasted and drank freely with him. Why is Benjamin's portion so fat? That's his little brother, his 100% blood brother, who they did not harm. And he wants to make sure in the famine that Benjamin eats and that Benjamin's will, because you're Rachel's line, just like I'm Rachel's line. Again, I ask the same question. If Benjamin had been sold off or killed, what do you think would have happened to the other 10 brothers? He would have got him. He'd have got that revenge. He'd have came after them. Yes.
But the Lord had his plan. It was the ultimate will and his divine will in making a nation, Israel, go back to Israel, the children of Israel. And he had to, just like he does us, individually shape, mold, and make him into who he wanted him to be. Because a nation is coming out of this little group, I think, was it?
That was his 70.
70.
That's what he's doing. God is at work. But you don't see his hand working. Joseph doesn't fully see his hand working. The brothers definitely don't see anything. And the old man, he doesn't see anything. And Benjamin's just eating. So nobody really sees what God's hand is doing. Nobody really sees the hand of God at work. God is always at work.
I don't fault them, because if I get an invitation to go to the White House to eat, you think that I'm going to get it? Things are altogether different.
If Trump was in the White House, I'm being honest with you. If Trump was in the White House and he invites you to eat, and he's accused you of something prior to, that would be more of a closer comparison. You have a Trump White House that he's inviting you to after he's accused you of being a spy. I'd be scared that I wouldn't come back from D.C. either. Okay? I'd be afraid I couldn't come back from D.C. either. That's more of a comparison between what they're facing here.
Right.
And they don't know what to make of what's, all they know is they're eating, and they're eating good.
That's right. That's right.
And he doesn't understand. Now they bow down a couple of times to him. They're happy. They don't. Although all the clues are there, what sin will do, and it's done it to me, it's done it to all of us sinners saved by grace, it will take away your peace, and it will take away your clarity of thought. See, had they sat down and put all of this together, they would have been able to figure out that this is, they probably could have said, this is Joseph, this has got to be our, and if it's not our brother who we think that, it's someone who met our brother, or someone who knows our family. They don't know what to think. They are hungry. They're wealthy boys who are hungry. And I tell you, you can have as much money as you want, but if you don't have any place to buy it, the money does you no good. Not a quarter. And remember, the famine is what? 7 years? And we don't know where they are in the famine, so this thing could be pretty severe. But that gave God enough time to do what? To bring them together. And even when Jacob messes the plan up and says, don't go back, he's really frustrating the plan. Because the plan is they go down and get Benjamin, bring him back. But just to show you that even God's plans can be frustrating, he's super ruled and he's sovereign. Because the famine created the perfect situation for the reignite. So every time you think your plan won't come to pass, or what God has for you won't come to pass, there is no one that can stop his plan. You can frustrate him. For example, you can frustrate it, but you will never stop the plan of God. Jacob messed everything up. They would have probably learned all of this sooner, come to reconciliation sooner, and been rulers sooner. But when Jacob said, don't go back, that frustrated the plan. But God's plan was that they would go back, and the famine was God's tool in bringing them back together. God uses trials and evil for his ultimate holy purpose. God uses good and evil for his purposes, his divine purposes. That is his divine will, which we only get to see a glimpse of it because we don't always see his hand operate. What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? You know, that's what we're always asking. What are you doing? Are you there? What are you doing? Yes.
You think they only just made 2 trips out of 7 years to go back to Egypt to get food?
They probably, being that they were wealthy, had a supply of food. The reason why they would only need 2 trips is they ran out of the supply the first time. Then the second time that they ran out again, because Jacob, being Jacob, probably thought he could outlast the famine, because it's outlasted everything else. With the food that they brought back. The food that they brought back was wasted. Now he's got to humble himself and go back. I'm sure they went other places for food, but they only made 2 trips to Egypt. Yes.
And Joseph and Pharaoh are the two that knew that it was going to last 7 years. They might not have known how many years. They figured, well, just like folks in California, it's going to rain, you know.
Right.
Nobody knows how long it's going to, you know, it was going to last.
No, nobody has any concept. Jacob probably believed he would get out of this like he got out of everything else, or he could con his way, trick his way into landing some food at some point. So yeah, I say they only went twice, but the Bible says they only went twice.
And they were not that religious like we think they were, since they were just, you know, shepherds, and the father was the head. You know, again, going back to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, because even that whole Mosaic system of priesthood, all that hadn't been set up yet.
Nope.
So they were just, you know,
They
looking to the Father.
look to the Father to guide them spiritually, and Jacob is their father. And so,
And Simeon and Reuben, you know, they killed folks. They did a lot of low-down stuff.
Simeon and Reuben were awful.
Yeah, and Judah too.
Judah,
Yeah.
you remember that whole thing with Tamar? Did we go through that in this class? That if we were Tamar, that was terrible. His wife dies and goes to heaven some fun. But show you how God used that. Had he not done that, the tribe of Judah would have been eliminated. That's what I say that God used, and if the tribe of Judah is eliminated, what happens to us? There's no Jesus. God uses all things. See, that's what kept the tribe going. When he connects with Tamar, because if you see what's happening is, the men are using the women, but they don't want to have kids by her, because it'd be his brother's kid, it'd be his brother's kid. Well, they're dying out. There's no babies coming from Judah. Had that thing with Tamar not happened, you wouldn't have been able to bring Christ through the line of Judah, which he has to come through. But God in his sovereignty allowed that to happen because the tribe of Judah must go on.
And those other 2 sons that Judah had, God didn't like them.
No, he killed both of them.
Killed them, yeah. He didn't like them.
He
So,
killed both of them.
and what we see again is his divine will and his permissive will. You know, it's so much the Lord is trying to teach us. If we was making something different, but he's letting us see the evil, the sin that lies within a human heart. You know.
You're talking about 40-mile journey in the desert. Would have been 40 miles to Canaan, back to Canaan out of Egypt. It took them 40 years to make it.
Sorry, Paul died.
They're awful. They were in the desert, and they just wandered in circles. Over and over again, just wandering in circles, and they're not making any progress because they're awful.
10 tribes in the north, 2 in the south.
They're all, that's the nation of Israel. Listen, we're ready to close out. Let's stand and be dismissed.
It's over.
God, we thank you tonight for those that have come to class. We pray safety on their travel home. Bring us into your will and glory. In Jesus' name, amen.
Lord.
Wait for your